Do you want to earn $100,000 a year while working only 5 hours a week as a composer? Well, stay tuned for my ultra-solid, grass-fed, organic, dairy-free, stone-cold certified fresh hacks for becoming a successful composer. That shit's stupid. If anybody's selling you on becoming a successful composer, it's probably a scam. Let's talk about the real deal of composer finances. So making money as a composer is hard enough. You also have to figure out what to do with it once you have it. Now, I am not a legal expert or a financial advisor, but these are some interesting things that I've learned over my career about finances and also how to track them. This is long and boring subject matter, and I'll do my best to make it interesting, but hopefully it's helpful for you. So be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment below any of the questions you have, and of course we do have memberships here on the channel. So if you want access to some of these videos early, or you want to interact with me and the community, join a membership here on the channel. So let's talk about some definitions in finances. And the first one being revenue and expenses, which is basically your incoming money, what you're making, and the expenses being what you're spending. Now we're going to take a look at some financial documents to see how this works, but you would also always see your revenue and expenses on perhaps your cash flow statement or a P&L. Now your P&L or profit and loss statement is going to tell you how you or the company is doing within a period of time. Because losing money in one month isn't necessarily a bad thing if that money is made up in a different month. So your P&L can depend on what you're looking at for a time period. We're going to take a look at a balance sheet, and that's going to show you the statement of your assets and as well as any of the debts or liabilities that you have. Liabilities being your financial obligations. We'll also take a look at your gross and net revenue. Gross being what you get before you pay anything out on it, so before taxes, and your net being the revenue that you make or the profit that you make after expenses. Debt is defined as what you owe, your financial obligations. This could be loans, or this could be payments that you owe for perhaps a ongoing payment plan. Now the big bad scary word is budget. And a budget really is just a goal for you and your own financial situation. So a budget is different for everyone because it depends on where you live, what are your responsibilities, and what are your goals. Now you may be off budget at times. You may have more money than you budgeted at times. A budget isn't a hardcore, solid, written in stone document. A budget is basically what shows you this was your goal, and your profit and loss kind of move around that. Your revenues and your expenses will change around your budget, but your budget should be your goal that is unique to you for where you see yourself at this time in your career. You're going to have things like your fixed costs, the things that are stuck, your rent, or any cost of living things that are basically just set in stone for you. You'll also have variable costs, those that change with how your company's doing. So perhaps you have a big year with a lot of recording sessions, you're going to hire more musicians, pay for more studio time, and then you'll have years where maybe you're not doing that as much, so you'll be paying for less of that. Royalties. That's something we'll talk about a little bit. We're not going to go into too much detail about how you get those royalties, but I suggest checking out the Mechanical Licensing Collective because they have some good information about royalties. But this is basically the payments that you'll receive for the rights to some asset that you have. And then of course there's your RBI, how many times you score each time at bat. It's a baseball joke. Last definition here is your forms, your tax forms. You'll have a W-2 and then you'll have a W-9 probably. There are a lot of other forms. Go check out the IRS's website. It's tons of fun. But a W-2 is when you're an employee of a company and they will give you that form at the end of the year or the beginning of the year that you'll be filing the taxes after. And in that W-2 form, you will have what you made from that company and possibly any withholdings you had. And then you'll have your W-9 form, which is very common for contractors. Sometimes you'll get that from a grant as well. W-9s, especially in a grant situation, will be given, perhaps let's say it's a $1,000 grant, and it is not withholding taxes. See, aren't we having fun already talking about all of these financial things? So these are some basic definitions and things that you're going to want to understand as we move forward. I think they're pretty important, and I know that when I finished grad school as a composer, I did not know nearly enough about all of these financial things, but That's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into this. All right. So in your budget, in your financial statements, in all of this stuff, we're going to be looking at revenue, what comes in, and expenses, what goes out. So let's first define some different revenue paths for you as a composer. So the first one, a big one, is being paid for your art. Now this is like solid cash, right? You created something, I give you $10 for it. So commissioning fees for a composer. You were hired to write music for a video game or a film. They are paying you X amount of dollars to do this work. This is not royalties. This is not back end. This is just you are worth X amount of dollars for the time that you're putting in. Now, you could also have products that you're selling. Perhaps you sell sheet music and you produce the sheet music yourself. Then you have those costs to create the sheet music, but then I'm going to buy the sheet music from you. So now I'm giving you $10. That's $10 of revenue for you under maybe the product line. You could also be selling your CDs because apparently kids are into CDs again. Perhaps you have vinyl. Are you selling on Bandcamp? Are you selling t-shirts on Spotify? All of that would fall into the category of product. Perhaps you create assets for sound design, or you have a contact instrument. Somebody buys that to use it, product revenue. Royalties. So these could come in as performance royalties, sync licensing, or mechanical royalties. Now, we're not going to go in and define what all of these things are because that's not what this video is about. This is just looking at the financials of that, but you will have that as revenue. Now, something to note about product sales or royalties is that you're probably splitting that revenue with somebody else, perhaps a publisher or whoever is responsible for disseminating the product or music. You also have what I like to call parallel work. So if you're a composer, there's the parallel work where you could be an orchestrator, a copyist doing engraving work, you could be an arranger, all of those different types of things, or perhaps you're assisting somebody who needs some more work on a project. So those are parallel work. Those are probably going to come in as specific fees at an hourly rate. And now a lot of composers also have teaching jobs. So maybe you're teaching lessons, maybe you're teaching in academia. Those could be W-2 because perhaps you are working at an institution that pays you to teach. Or that could be the type of situation where folks are paying you kind of as a contractor, as a private teacher, and you're just receiving money individually from them. Now, there's nothing wrong with a mixed life of having a W-2 life and a W-9 life. A lot of people do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's important to understand the differences between them and how you want to calculate and keep track of all of that revenue. Now, of course, there are a ton of other types of revenue that you could receive. Perhaps you're a performer, perhaps you're a sound engineer. I don't know, maybe you crochet and sell that. All of those things, if they're specific to this company that you're doing as a composer, then they're going to be part of the revenue that you want to track. Now, your expenses, these could be all sorts of things. You could have studio rent. You could pay for musicians. You could buy different products that you need. That Spitfire library that you're definitely buying. There's all this gear around us, and you need that in order to make your work, so that could count as some of your expenses. You could also be traveling for a performance. Let's say that some orchestra somewhere is playing your music, or there's a recording session somewhere. So you have the expenses that get you there, that house you there. There could be subscriptions that you have to pay for, Pro Tools, all sorts of different things. So that's up to you. It's individual to you, but you'll want to track those expenses. Now, tracking, that's what's important. That's what we're really going to look at. Tracking your income and expenses is important for obviously the practical taxes reason, but it's also a good evaluation of where you're at in your career. Budgeting is basically the ability to take a look and be like, can I afford that new library? Do I need it? And can I afford it? The analysis of how you're doing financially could also expose some things. Perhaps you are spending a ton of money on studio space somewhere to record really small things like 1 or 2 people. Perhaps there would be a better way to do that, and you wouldn't know that because perhaps it comes up only every other month or so. But then once you look at this over time, you can see, there's a lot of expenses in a certain category that don't really make sense. Maybe I should make a change for that. You hear this often at the end of the year when folks see, oh my gosh, I'm subscribed to Paramount, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all of these other things. I haven't watched any of those shows in so long. Do I really need this? So that's the purpose, right? So you can analyze how you're doing. Perhaps teaching isn't really that beneficial for you financially. Perhaps you're spending a lot of time teaching, but you're not making that much money. So maybe you need to raise your fee, or maybe you need to spend some more time elsewhere. Again, it's analysis and it's specific to you. Now, to get this information, there's all sorts of different ways you could do it, of course. You could use QuickBooks, you could use Zoho, you could use some other Intuit software. There's a lot of different things like that out there. You could also just use a basic spreadsheet. We're going to take a look at some things with Excel because I really like Excel. But you could, of course, do this with Google Sheets. And I'm not backed by any company. I don't really support any of these financial institutions. But whatever you're going to do, however you're going to do it, I recommend being consistent. Moving from one place to another can be really complicated. There's a lot of sort of nuances between different software. Pick what's best for you where you're at in your career. If you're really not spending that much time making that much money as a composer, you're doing more elsewhere, you maybe don't need QuickBooks. Perhaps you could just do it on a spreadsheet. So that's up to you to decide, but we'll mostly be working in the spreadsheet. So what are we going to track? We're going to track everything. All of our assets, we're going to track our revenue, and we're going to track our expenses. Now again, this isn't financial advice. This is just what I do because I'm kind of crazy like that. And I like to keep an eye on everything to do with the business. So we're going to set these things up so we can look at our financials. There's one thing that I think is kind of interesting, which is a chart of accounts, which is using GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles. Ever see those numbers on a chart of accounts or a financial statement and you don't know what they mean? Well, this is what they mean. GAAP. So there's a kind of just settled upon idea by a bunch of nerdy financial folks that decided some accounting numbers to keep track of these different items. And it's just kind of an easy way to keep track. It's just a basic thing. This isn't necessary. This is kind of a bonus. And if you have a finance person, they'll probably be thrilled that you're thinking about this. But the 100 series, 1000 series is usually assets, 200 liabilities, 300 equities, 400 revenues, 500 expenses, and 600 other. Now, this is me dipping into Finance 102, but today is really about Finance 101. But I think this is important to understand because it's more about knowing how you're going to consistently keep track of different things. Because back in the day, there wasn't all of this great searching within software where you could find different information in your spreadsheets or whatever. So having the number on the account, let's say 1001 was royalties, it'd be a lot easier to say, okay, what's going on in 1001 as opposed to, how do we find whatever royalty it is? I don't know. It's a basic thing. It's a high level nerdy thing. I think it's interesting. I like to track my hours. Like literally, I track the hours it takes me to do every project. This is for a couple reasons. One, how much am I actually working? And two, let's say I have a project and I'm asked to write music for a video game. And it's a really short amount of music. And they're saying, how much does it cost to do this? After a couple of years of doing this, I can look back, how much time does it really take me to do certain types of work? So I track everything because for me, it's just more information. It helps me to know how much time does it really take. Especially early on in my career, I'd be like, oh yeah, I could do that in a couple hours. In reality, that would take 10 hours and I was undercharging. So again, this is just information analysis for myself, but I like to track hours and keep an eye on what I'm doing. Now, as a composer who's a freelancer, nobody's really paying me an hourly rate to do things, unless I add it to my fee, right? So if it's $100 to write music, it's incredibly low, I know. But if I'm getting $100 and I see that it's gonna take me 20 hours to do that, now I divide that $100 by 20, you can see I'm getting a pretty low fee for the amount of hours I'm doing. Again, that's why I like to track all this stuff. I think it's helpful to see how you're doing. All right, let's talk about a P&L, your profit and loss statement. Now this is gonna focus on your profitability. How much money have you made after expenses? So here we are. We have a P&L over here, and in this example, it's showing a profit if revenue exceeds the expenses, right? So if our revenue, this is our total, if it exceeds what our total expenses are, which is right here, hey, we have a profit. Now this has nothing to do with time, because perhaps some of these expenses happen at one time and the money comes at another. Some projects will pay you at the front end a little bit and at the back end. That is not what this is showing. This is the overarching within a period of time. So this may not be the best thing to see how much money do I really have right now. For that, to understand your liquidity, you're going to want to look at your cash flow statement. Cash flow, here we are. So we have our cash that's coming in. We got some commissions here, did some teaching. Cash outflows. So we had to lease the studio, we had to pay for some musicians, so we had some expenses. And our net from all that, we made $3,170. These are made up numbers. None of this is real. It's just an example. Now, also perhaps we bought some equipment, and that's a bit of an investment, right? Because you could sell that at some point. It could depreciate. We're not going into that right now, but it's a thing. And you could sell some other equipment perhaps that month. And this is, let's say we're talking January. Maybe you took out a loan and you had to pay a little bit of a fee on that loan. And so this is what you made or didn't make from the financing. And then this is the net cash flow for the month. So that's everything combined. And so at the beginning of the month, you had $1,500. And at the end of the month, you had $5,500. So cash flow is kind of like how healthy are you? What money is coming in, what money is coming out in a really specific time period. This is really granular stuff. I don't necessarily look at this very often unless I need to. I usually have a more overarching view of what's going on. But that's just my life right now. I don't know. It changes from time to time. But a cash flow statement versus a P&L. That's what we're looking at right now. So your cash flow here is highlighting if you have like any shortfalls that are going to come and you're going to need to pull out of your savings. And this is just kind of like letting you know where you're at immediately, while the P&L is thinking a lot more about your profit or your losses for a larger chunk of time. Now that's everything that's coming in and going out over a period of time. But what if you want to just see like what's in all my accounts? So you could have a lot of different accounts, and that could be a checking account. Maybe you have a savings account. Maybe you have investments. Maybe you have liabilities, and maybe you have assets that are worth something. So you would see all of that on your balance sheet. Now this is, again, kind of higher level. If you're working in QuickBooks or any of those other software, it'll probably generate these forms for you. And again, if you're working in spreadsheets, you don't necessarily need to do this all yourself. But I think it's important to know and understand what's a balance sheet. So here on my balance sheet, I am seeing my current assets, like I said, any receivables. Let's say I had a commission and they're sending me $3,000 via snail mail check. So it's just going to take a bit to get here. That's in accounts receivable, right? It's kind of accrued, but it's not cash. Accrued expenses over here. So these are your liabilities. Perhaps you owe some people money and you're expending this much. You're spending $1,200. All sorts of different things that you could have here. But this is just your balance sheet. So it's just showing like the health of how many assets do you have? What's your liabilities? All right. So budgeting and managing your expenses. Now I'm not here to make you feel bad about going over budget sometimes. That's fine sometimes. I don't know, I'm not in charge. But your budget will help you see recurring costs. So perhaps you don't need that Netflix subscription. Maybe you do, I don't know. Budgeting can help you prepare for more difficult months. Let's say you work in academia. So you're following the academic calendar, which is pretty much like August or September through May or June. So that leaves June, July as kind of a quiet period. So perhaps you're not gonna make as much money in those months. So your budget can help you plan for that. So you need to maybe stockpile a few pizzas away to save them for that period of time. Budgeting can also help you prepare for whatever taxes you owe, right? Like if you're a W-9 and you're receiving that $1,000 grant and there's no taxes taken out on that, you may have to pay taxes for that when your time comes. So a budget can help you prepare for that and see how you need to allocate and prepare your funds for an entire year. So let's take a look at a budget with those chart of account numbers. And we can see how that's all working together with the budgeted plan and the actual money that came in. All right, this is my pretty budget versus actuals document. And this is for the month of January, apparently. This person's doing okay. So their commission revenue, right? And because that's under revenues, we're putting that under the 400 series or the 4,000 series in our chart of accounts. And we're also showing what our royalties, licensing, our teaching revenue, all these different revenue are. Now we budgeted for $5,000. What we actually got was $4,000. So we have a $1,000 variance, which means we're down about 20% in this category. Granted, we had a little bit of difference because our licensing revenue was a little bit higher than what we had planned for. So we're up 20% there. So we can see how we did in our revenue this month for what we were really getting in versus what we were planning. Now, in your budgeting, if you don't typically bring in $10,000 of commissions a month, don't budget for $10,000 per month. That's just not good budgeting. Budget for a real world expectation. The past can inform the future. So if last month you made $50 in commissions, put $50 for this month. Or if you know that at a certain point in time, certain time of the year, it's lower and a certain time of the year is higher, adjust for that within your monthly budgets. We'll take a look at how it looks over time. But again, it's specific to you and what you do. And it's not supposed to make you feel bad. It's not supposed to make you feel good. It's not emotional. It's just numbers. It's just information. Set your budget at where you think things could be. And if you're making more than that, awesome. Now we have our operating expenses. And these are also kind of fixed things, right? So the studio lease, we have software subscriptions, marketing tool. Let's say you pay for boosts or something on social medias. I don't know. These are those costs. Again, we have a variance, and this is how it came out. We have our variable expenses. There was a little bit of travel, a little bit of advertising that was done, and this is how we planned it, and this is how it happened. So now this is our net profit. So we're looking at, we had thought we were going to bring in $4,900 this month, but we brought in $4,520. So we're down about $380 for the month. And this is what we know, right? It's not here to make you feel bad or good. It's just information. So now below, we have these assets. So perhaps you have money in accounts receivable that you're owed. So that's great. So that'll maybe make up for the loss. Maybe you have some cash in the bank, you have some property, you've accumulated some depreciation. Again, we're not going to talk about that. Go look at that elsewhere because that's above my pay grade. It's also outside of, I think, this Finance 101 session. And we have a few liabilities here, right? Accounts payable, so musicians that you owe for work, any short-term loans that you may have. That's all listed here. So now we're seeing how we imagined or what our goal was for our finances versus what really happened per month. And, I think the first times you ever do this, if you're brand new to budgeting, you'll be off, and that's okay. You learn as you go, because over time you'll get a little bit better understanding of what you should expect in your career. And of course, there are crazy changes. There are COVIDs that happen. But things like this can really help you make plans and visualize what does your life look like. Take a look here. In this example, we have a lot of different revenues. This is the gross revenue, right? This is all just coming in. And then we have these expenses, and this being the net revenue. So the revenue after expenses, because it was a profitable month. So here, because I love charts, they're so hip, you can see the breakdown of where your revenue was and where your expenses were. This tells us that rent is a huge chunk of your life and commissions is a big chunk of your life. Royalties, not so much. But apparently you're really doing well with the commissions. So if you're doing that well with commissions, then I think that would inform some decisions that you should probably keep hunting for commissions. You've got a good network and you're able to pull in work. Keep leaning into that network and finding that work. Maybe this also tells the story that licensing and royalties aren't really working out as much right now. So perhaps you need to put more effort in there, or if you just don't really care and it's just a small amount, cool, good to know. A little bit of money coming in on the side. So what does this look like over time? Actuals over time. So this is an imagined one whole year, and this is how this person's doing their commission revenues, royalties, licensing, and teaching. I'm going to zoom in here because probably the biggest qualms that everybody have with any of my videos is I don't zoom in enough. So I'm zooming in. So here we are. We can see all these different expenses and revenue over time. Some months were better than others. And here we have our net profit for each month. This person had a pretty low July compared to their May for a myriad of reasons, but now we can see that over time. So going down here, this is what it looks like, right? This is a really simple chart that shows us how are our revenue and how is our expenses. And again, this isn't emotional. This is just showing, hey, there are some up periods, some down periods. So for next year, for 2026, do you think that the year will look the same? Will it look different? And if it's different, why? So this is just informing how you're going to budget. You know you're going to have a big residency that's going to happen. You know this big movie's coming down the pipeline. They filmed in 2025. They go into post in 2026. Great. So your budget is informed by all those things plus everything from the past. So I like to see these charts. I like to use these and see where I'm at with whatever's going on. I'm also looking at these charts for other organizations that I work with or nonprofits that I run. Knowing the financial status and the health of an organization is really critical and important, especially at certain stages of growth. You just want to make sure you're able to pay your bills. In a freelance life, instability is common and difficult. Emergencies happen, life changes. So when you budget, you can plan a little bit better for savings and setting things aside. We're not really talking much about investments, but savings are always a good thing. If you can save a little bit of away at a time, that's really great, especially if you can put it into a high yield savings account or any other savings investments that's going to grow steadily over time and take care of you a long time from now. Perhaps you don't have the ability to put hundreds of dollars away right now into savings. That's fine. I think it's probably better to put a tiny bit if you can, but if you can't, that's okay. Get them next time. Again, that's not really financial advice. That's just what I've experienced. When I could put a little bit away for next time, I do. And when I can't, I don't. This stuff is complicated, and it can be really good to have a financial advisor to help you. Maybe an accountant to help you set up these accounts, maybe a dog to bark at you. But having an expert take a look at these financials can be really helpful. Now, of course, this can all depend at what stage of your career you're at, but keep it in mind that this stuff is pretty complicated, and it's complicated for a reason. So if you need the help, find somebody who can help you. And if you're just starting out and you're not really sure what to do, maybe just pull out a pen and paper and write down what is the revenue that you know of and what are the expenses that you know of. That's a great place to start. Tracking your incoming cash and your outgoing cash is important. I think so, at least. And it can be really helpful. A lot of composers aren't readily prepared for the work of running a small business because a lot of the times when we came out of school, we were just told, hey, you'll get a job, it'll be great. And then you make some money and now it's like, what do I do with it? So that's where finance comes into play. Hopefully this is helpful for you in tracking what you're gonna do, analyzing the money that you have, and figuring out a good game plan. It's important, I think, to keep an eye on how you're doing. And don't let me get in the way of buying that new Berlin Strings plugin. I'm sure it's amazing. But I hope that this video is helpful for you. If you like this type of stuff, like the video, comment, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments below. Probably ask a professional because Lord knows I don't know anything. And also, just feel free to put down a dog emoji in the comments below. Why not? Also, if you have your own financial tips for composers, throw those in the comments below. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.